My name's Jack. I spent the last 17 years keeping oil rigs from blowing sky high. My job was safety, until my new boss said I was too careful. Yeah, too careful. On a steel beast sitting on top of 10,000 feet of flammable pressure, just itching for a spark. Being too careful is the reason I still have all my limbs. But let me take you back, show you how this all started. Because this isn't just a story about me losing my job. It's a warning and a reckoning. Oil rigs aren't for the soft or the slow. We work in places where the horizon is nothing but open ocean. No roads, no sirens, no second chances. You get hurt out there. You don't get an ambulance. You get a body. Back every day on the platform, we deal with volatile, crude, explosive gases. Weather that can flip a 20-ton container like a soda can. If a pipe bursts, if pressure spikes, if a seal leaks, you've got seconds, and I mean seconds. Before everything goes black and hot and final, I was the guy standing between that and the crew, the safety supervisor. But most just called me Hawk, 'cause I saw everything. I'd earned that respect. I'd done my time in the Gulf, the North Sea, off Nigeria, 120-hour weeks, crawling through narrow shafts with a flashlight in my mouth and a checklist in my hand. And yeah, I checked things twice, sometimes 3 times. Not because I liked rules, but because I'd seen what happens when someone skips one. Hell, 3 years ago, I caught a pressure valve reading that didn't match. Shut down the whole flow line. Boss back then cursed me up and down until we opened that section and found a corroded flange so thin a soda straw could have poked through. If I hadn't flagged it, we'd have had a gas fire and a death toll. That day earned me a bonus and a reputation. But reputations don't matter when someone new walks in thinking they know better. He showed up wearing polished boots that had never seen a drop of crude, crisp shirt, corporate badge clipped proud, and that cocky smile of a man who's read more spreadsheets than hazard reports. Connor Gates, Regional Ops Manager. Early 30s, Ivy League. All swagger, no scars. The first thing he said in the morning briefing was, "We're running too slow. I want this platform 15% more efficient by next quarter." Then he looked straight at me and added, "Let's start by trimming down unnecessary safety delays. This ain't rocket science, it's just oil. Just oil. That's like calling a live wire just electricity." At first, I kept my mouth shut. You don't last 2 decades in this job without learning when to speak and when to observe, so I kept doing my checks, quietly. Sometimes off the clock, I didn't log every inspection, I just did them. I taught the greenhorns how to listen for pressure differences, how to smell gas leaks before the alarms went off, how to respect the beast under their feet. But Connor didn't like that. He started poking at me during meetings, called me Grandpa. Jack joked that I was slowing down operations. Crew laughed nervously. They didn't mean it, but they also didn't want to lose their spots. Then came the valve incident. We were prepping to bring Line C online. It hadn't flowed in over 2 years. I ran my usual pre-op checks, and the moment I tested valve P43, I felt the give. Not a lot, but enough to make my gut twist. I flagged it, ordered a halt, told them no flow until we swapped it. Connor stormed down from the trailer like he was on a mission. Red in the face, hands waving, yelling in front of everyone. "You, delaying us again over some squeaky valve. You think we're made of money, Jack?" I didn't yell back, just stood there and said, "You want to risk a blowout over a $40 valve?" He wrote me up that day, cited disrupting operational flow and non-emergency shutdowns. Said I was creating fear. I could see the crew shifting, eyes low, respect turning into worry. They trusted me, but they had families, mortgages. They needed those hours. I kept working, kept checking, quietly, but I knew what was coming. 3 weeks later, I got called into the office trailer. No warning, just a cold, grey afternoon and a paper in front of me. Termination due to repeated inefficiencies and obstruction of management. Directives. I asked if I could at least finish training the new guy. Connor smiled and said, "Don't worry, we'll manage just fine without your paranoia." No handshake, No thank you. Security escorted me off the platform like I'd sabotaged something. I didn't fight it, didn't yell. I just paused at the helipad, looked back at that twisted jungle of pipes and tanks and gas lines. That place was a ticking bomb, I thought. They just fired the guy holding the timer. I spent the next 2 days on land, hollowed out, 17 years gone in a shrug. I'd given my bones to that platform, missed birthdays, funerals, even my own damn wedding anniversary because a compressor needed checking. And now I was just a ghost with a clipboard and a pension that hadn't kicked in. But then my phone started ringing. First it was Caleb, one of the drill techs. He didn't say much, just, "Jack, I think something's wrong, real wrong." Then came more calls, maintenance guys, crew leads, even one of the site engineers. Their voices were all the same, tight, anxious, scared. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong, and then finally, Connor, he called me. I let it ring once, twice, then I picked up. His voice was shaky. "We need your help. There's a pressure surge we can't trace. Sensors are offline. Jack, we don't know what's going on." I sat there, cold coffee in my hand. They fired me for doing my job, I thought. Now they were begging me to come back and stop the bleeding. I picked up the call just before dawn. My phone lit up with night shift on the screen. Dale's number. His voice came through ragged, every breath a crash of panic. I haven't heard fear like that in a man's voice in years, I thought as I keyed the line open. "Jack, it's chaos. Pressures through the roof, alarms everywhere, and the crew, they don't know which way's up." That one sentence was enough to jar me fully awake. I'd been off the rig 48 hours, buried in regrets and a few cold beers. I'd considered moving on, some quieter gig with less volatile assets. But hearing Dale, I knew this was bigger than me, bigger than any paycheck or pride. Dale stammered through the details. 3 of my core safety protocols had been scrapped by order of Connor Gates. The emergency shut-off checklist, my frontline defense against runaway pressure, was deemed redundant. The redundant pressure relief valve test, waste of time. The twice-daily backup pump activation, not cost-effective. And now, valve readings had been creeping upward for hours without a halt. One of the safety pumps, the very one I flagged 6 months ago, hadn't even been tested in days. New hires were on deck, green and scared stiff, too petrified to trigger a shutdown. A single minor gas leak had gone unreported. In seconds, that whisper of hydrocarbon sprayed into the air had turned a corridor into a rolling fuse. Rig lockdown was initiated, red lights stabbing into the darkness. Helicopters began circling overhead like vultures. I didn't jump on the next flight. I didn't rush into the storm. In moments like these, patience is a weapon. Let them stew in their own mess. I watched the inbound flights, saw corporate execs scrambling, suits heading for the helipad, faces pinched, statements being drafted. They needed damage control. They needed me, so I let them sweat. 2 hours later, a chopper landed 5 miles off, skimming the swell before touching down on the helipad. Connor emerged first, clean-shaven, tie flapping in the rotor wash, cheeks pale. Behind him, a cluster of suits carrying laptops and clipboards like shields. They approached me hesitantly. The same men who'd marched me off the rig 2 days. Pryor now offered me a deal. Consultant status, full access, and all expenses paid. I didn't smile. Didn't raise an eyebrow. I folded my arms, feeling the weight of 17 years anchored in my chest. "On one condition," I said. Voice low, Connor nodded too quickly. "Name it." I gave them my price, a 6-figure consulting fee, a formal apology on company letterhead, and full legal clearance for any actions I took on board. He stuttered, glanced at the execs behind him. Every face told the same story. Desperation. They agreed. Walking back onto that rig felt like stepping through a veil. One moment I was on land, a ghost they'd written off. The next, I was boots on, steel grating, every footstep echoing like a drum roll. The air reeked of crude sweat and something hotter, fear. The crew stopped mid-task, eyes wide. Some pulled off their helmets, wiping grime from foreheads. Others turned away, ashamed. But a handful of old-timers, men I'd trained, nodded once, quietly. Connor's face was the picture of defeat. He stared at me, mouth agape, holding a tablet showing flashing red metrics. Pressure curves spiking, pump statuses offline, temperature readings flirting with ignition points. I didn't gloat. I needed data, not cheap thrills. I moved through. The platform like a surgeon, methodical, precise. Section A. I checked the main manifold gauges. One pressure line, line C, was reading 2/3 higher than spec. The relief valve hadn't opened. It was frozen. Why? Because the check I forced 2 years ago had worn its seals, and without regular activation, it seized. Section B. Over in the secondary pump bay, the backup pump sat silent. Connor's team had parked it with a maintenance due tag that had never been cleared. No one bothered to test it. Section C, in the old control room, the emergency shut-off lever was missing. They'd removed it last week, citing streamlining. Without it, there was no manual override. I catalogued each failure in my mind. This wasn't normal negligence. It was system-wide dismantling of every safeguard I'd built. Someone had orchestrated a perfect storm. As I walked past, I overheard 2 juniors, Jake and Maria, whispering, eyes flicking to me and then to the gauges. "Jack's back," Maria murmured. Jake nodded, voice trembling. "Thank God." I found Connor slumped against the control room wall, backlit by alarm strobes. His hands trembled around a mug of lukewarm coffee. I stood over him, calm but unyielding. "You dismissed my protocols. Now half this rig's a one-way ticket to Valhalla," he swallowed hard. "Please just tell me what to do." I paused. This was leverage. My moment of power. You rebuild every safety check I had in place. You run the shut-off drill I mandated weekly. You stop production every time the gauges run wild. Understood? He nodded, eyes wet. Good. I spent the next hour guiding the crew through emergency procedures. We tested every valve. We cycled pumps. We rerouted pressure lines. Alarms blared in intervals. Intense metallic wails ripping through steel corridors. Crew members slapped silencers, toggled gauges, shouted confirmations over comm channels. I barked orders. Shut down Sector 4. Reroute to bypass. Prep the nitrogen purge. The corporate suits hovered behind plexiglass panels, mouths agape. They scribbled notes. They filmed handheld videos on their phones. For them, this was a spectacle. For me, it was my legacy saved or lost. Then I found it. The hidden failure nobody expected. Behind a locked panel in the sub-level control room sat the secondary pressure relief manifold, a unit I'd designed but hadn't logged. After its installation 5 years ago, it was bypassed at the factory. I'd tested it personally, but never updated the digital record because the vendor's specs were out of sync with our new software. Connor's team never knew it existed. They'd never checked it. I flipped open the panel door. It creaked. Inside, the manifold's brass fittings were unlatched, ready to vent. An old wire, bare and frayed, snaked down into the woodwork. A single spark there could have torched the rig. My heart thudded. This was the catastrophe they didn't see coming. I grabbed the emergency override tool I carried on my belt, a T-handled Torquay wrench, custom-fitted for precisely this manifold. I tightened the valve wheel until my knuckles bled, watching the pressure gauge drop from a deadly spike to a safe baseline. Behind me, alarm stilled like a wounded animal settling down. The rig held its breath. I wiped sweat and oil from my brow, looking up at the crew. Their faces were hollow, wide-eyed. Connor stumbled in behind me. "Is it over?" I didn't answer. I looked at the rig, the humming turbines, the silent valves. I thought of the men who trusted me, the greenhorns who believed I'd keep them safe. Finally, I said, voice low, "I'm not here to save this company. I'm here to save the men who trusted me." I turned to Connor. "You're going to rebuild what you tore down. or I walk away and let someone else inherit this mess." He swallowed, nodded. "Whatever you say, Jack." I stood on the deck as the sun rose, the rig quiet now except for distant thumps of restarting pumps. The sea was calm, a cruel contrast to the chaos of hours before. I felt every ounce of fatigue, every ache in my bones, but I also felt something stronger. Vindication. I'd let them taste fear, let them beg. They fired me for doing my job. Now, they needed me to do it again. And as the chopper lifted me away, this time on my own terms, I looked back at the rig. Steel girders gleaming in the sunrise. I knew the real battle was just beginning, because some mistakes can't be undone with a wrench, and some people deserve more than an apology. The rain was coming down in sheets when I stepped back onto the rig deck, cold metal under my boots, the same smell of salt, rust, and oil. But something was wrong. You could feel it in the air. It was charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. They'd called me in too late, but not too late for me. Dale met me at the gangway. His eyes were bloodshot, knuckles white where he gripped his hard hat. "Jack, we've got a pressure build-up in line 4. It's reading 170 over baseline. Nobody caught it until it started humming." I didn't say a word, just nodded once and walked past him toward the heart of the beast. In the control room, the main panel was a mess. Screens flashing red, alerts blinking non-stop, and the boss, that slick little bastard, standing off to the side like a deer caught in floodlights. "Don't listen to him," he shouted the moment I walked in. "We've got it under control." No one even looked his way. I went straight to the master console. Took one look and my stomach dropped. Pressure in the subsea manifold was spiking. Over-pressurized lines were nearing fail point, and the emergency blowout preventers hadn't cycled in the last diagnostic run. The wellhead integrity could be compromised. They were staring down a catastrophic blowout. One spark, one wrong valve turn, and we'd be reduced to headlines and wreckage. "Shut off auxiliary flow lines," I ordered. "Reroute through the secondary manifold. I need eyes on the mudweight in the return column. Now!" The crew moved. Fast. They remembered. Not even the new boss tried to speak again. I led them through the protocol. My protocol. The one I wrote 5 years ago and had to fight tooth and nail to get approved. Of course, the company shelved it when they axed me, said it was overkill. Today, it was the only thing standing between them and a grave in the Gulf. We split the crew into 3 teams: containment, shut-off, and reroute, the emergency valve. On line 4 groaned when we turned it, stuck from months of neglect. 2 men had to brace it while I leaned into the release. When it finally gave, the hiss of pressure escaping was like a scream. Rain hammered the deck. Radios crackled, boots thundered against metal. I could feel the rig trembling beneath me, and then silence. The alarm stopped. The vibration underfoot eased, and in that moment, standing on the slick metal, soaked to the bone, I looked around and saw faces staring at me, not with fear anymore, but with something else. Respect. Maybe guilt. Or maybe they were just realizing how close they'd come to dying under someone else's orders. I didn't need to say anything. The crew did the talking for me. "I told you we needed a full diagnostic 3 days ago." One roustabout snapped at the boss. He ignored the request, Dale said. Said it'd waste production hours. That's when the whispers started, low, sharp, angry. Then someone handed me a clipboard, an incident log they'd been keeping. Unauthorized maintenance changes, suppressed safety requests, outdated draining records signed off under his name. I took it without a word. By sundown, HR had called. They were opening an internal inquiry. The boss? He was holed up in his office, door locked, blinds drawn. Helicopters flew out that night. 2 men left, one in a suit. I wasn't told where they were going, but I knew. What no one knew, not yet, was that I'd started preparing long before the call came in. The day I was fired, I knew something was off. Not just bad decisions, something worse. I'd been careful. Ever since, I'd kept copies of emails, recorded calls, logs of bypassed checklists, orders from above to cut corners quietly. I had a drive full of evidence, neatly organized, time-stamped, backed up in 3 places. I had even reached out to an old contact at the Department of Interior, quietly, anonymously. But after today, after almost losing a dozen good men to pure negligence, I made my move. I sent the full report, not just to the agency, but to someone hungrier. Her name was Claire Jennings, investigative journalist. She'd taken down a mining giant in Wyoming 2 years ago. She'd been waiting for something new. I gave her everything. 2 days later, news vans showed up at the heliport. I watched from the catwalk as the crew crowded near the monitors, watching themselves on national news. Headlines: Oil rig disaster. Narrowly avoided, whistleblower alleges corporate negligence. Safety violations ignored for profit claims, former lead inspector. That same afternoon, a man from corporate handed me an envelope. Thick, confidential, hush money. I didn't open it, just handed it back. You think this is about money? I asked. I was willing to die on this rig. You think I won't burn it down if I have to? They tried to smile. Failed. Walked away. By nightfall, federal investigators arrived with full authority. They grounded the rig, seized logs, isolated the core systems. The boss was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. That's what they called it. He didn't speak to me when they walked him off the deck, couldn't even meet my eyes, and me, I stayed behind. There was still work to do, because this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I wasn't just going to take down the man who fired me. I was about to bring the whole rotten tower down with him. I never wanted to be a hero. All I ever wanted was for the men I worked beside to make it home in one piece. But after the day I saved the rig from becoming a flaming coffin in the middle of the Gulf, my face was everywhere. The video I sent out, detailing the failure, the negligence, and the paper trail that proved upper management knew, spread like wildfire. Oil rig almost blows. Due to negligence, the headlines screamed. News outlets ran with it. Footage of the near blowout, crew interviews, even my emergency logs flashed across screens nationwide. One anchor called it the most terrifying near miss in offshore drilling history. Another simply said, "This man saved lives." Government. Regulators were at the company's doors within days, suits and boots walking the deck, combing through records, interviewing the crew. I watched it all unfold from my small rental house 2 towns over, coffee in hand, heart steady. The boss, the one who fired me for caring too much, was now the face of it all. Cameras caught him ducking reporters, his name dragged through every media outlet. Internal emails leaked, showing how he dismissed my concerns, how he pushed for speed over safety. The board of directors, desperate to save face, launched a full-scale internal investigation. Poetic justice had begun its slow, satisfying descent. A week later, I got a call from a national news anchor. They didn't want drama. They wanted my story. I agreed, on one condition: I wouldn't play the victim. I wanted to speak as the man who wrote the safety protocols, the man who saved a rig full of lives with a calm voice and an emergency checklist. So there I was, live on national television, facing a camera, a microphone, and millions of viewers. I wasn't trying to be a hero, I told them. I was just doing what the job required. We can't cut corners with pressure lines and blowout preventers and expect miracles. The anchor asked what I felt when I stepped back onto the rig that night. I paused. Responsibility, I said. That rig wasn't just steel and oil. It was people. Fathers, sons, brothers. If keeping them alive makes me too careful, then I'll wear that like a badge. The response was overwhelming. My inbox overflowed. Former crewmates, strangers, even offshore veterans from years past wrote in. They called me a leader. Some admitted they'd once rolled their eyes at my safety talks, but not anymore. One message hit me hardest. "Jack, I watched you take control when we were seconds from dying. I'll never doubt you again. Thank you for saving my life." The board didn't waste time. The boss was terminated with cause. That meant no severance, no golden parachute, just a letter ending his career. Civil lawsuits began to roll in. A few of the crew, suffering PTSD from the near catastrophe, filed claims. Others cited unsafe working conditions backed by my logs, emails, and testimonies. My documentation proved the boss had deliberately bypassed 2 layers of safety verification, ignored direct emails from engineers, ordered systems to stay online. When readings screamed for shutdown, the federal government hit the company with a staggering fine. New safety reform mandates were issued across the sector, not just for our rig, but for the entire Gulf operation. Emergency protocols were reviewed, rewritten, and many were based on the one I created years ago. I didn't celebrate. I just watched, quietly, like a man watching the tide finally carry away a shipwreck he tried to warn everyone about. With everything coming to light, companies across the industry started calling me. Not for interviews, for advice. That's when the idea struck: a private safety consultancy. I wasn't going back offshore, but I wasn't done protecting the people who did. I founded my firm out of a tiny rented office above a hardware store. Within 3 months, I had contracts with 3 oil companies, each one wanting audits, training, emergency procedure rewrites. I set the standards now, the ones I believed in, the ones that saved lives. And I didn't forget the men who stood by. I called up 3 of my former crewmates, offered them jobs, good pay, full benefits, no corner cutting, no corporate pressure to speed things up, just respect, just integrity. We built something together, quiet, strong, and untouchable. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that rig, the sound of metal groaning under pressure, the silence after the release, the look in the men's eyes when they realized they were still alive. I'm not angry anymore, not bitter, just wiser. They fired me for doing too many safety checks, for double confirming blowout valves, for insisting on integrity in a world obsessed with output, and in doing so, they handed me the keys to their downfall. Because being too careful almost cost me my job. But in the end, it saved a crew, brought down a corrupt regime, and redefined what leadership really looks like in this industry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw punches. I kept my records. I held my ground. And when the time came, I made sure the truth roared louder than any explosion ever could. They fired me for caring too much. Now the whole world knows. That's what saved them.